Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Pen Connect with Women Authors. We are delighted to have a superlative panel of writers who have been championing their space in writing. We also have with us, before we go ahead and introduce the panelists, I'm just going to go ahead and pass on the baton to Shobit Dabral, who is going to go ahead and moderate this session for us. Shobit is a master mariner, and he has been writing on and off as a hobby, but then he discovered that he is more than a hobbyist. So he just published his first book and turned author this month, and we are going to very soon on Penmancy, we are going to go ahead and highlight his book as well so that you can grab it. He also reads short stories of indie authors on his podcast, which is called Pint of a Story, and he spearheads the company Studio Cacophony. Welcome, Shobit. It is lovely to have you here. And right now, I'm just going to go ahead and pass on this mic to you so that you can introduce our panelists and we can take this conversation head on. All right. Thank you so much. And over to you, Shobit.
Thank you. And we are here today, of course, to discuss how the thrillers and historical fiction written by women are making headway in India, especially. I will not waste your time. I will get straight ahead with the business and introduce our first panelist is Deblina Majumdar. We hear that she wanted to be both an archaeologist and a mathematician as a kid. How does that work? I mean, you're probably the only kid I know of who wanted to be a mathematician ever. And archaeology, I mean, they had to dig me out of my childhood and let me know I was a relic already before I knew what archaeology was. So how does that work for a kid?
So I think the common thing is I like digging, and I probably wasn't allowed to carry a spade and dig up civilizations. So I ended up digging for stories. And I think the common thing in everything I write, whether it's crime fiction or historical fiction, or I write a lot of non-fiction for business, I write for Economic Times Prime, and then I run my own company where what I work on is data storytelling, using data to find insights. I think the common thread is I like digging. So I think the fact that I was not given a spade when I was young is what I'm still my parents are still paying the price for. I'm still digging. And the genre I've chosen, I think, allows me to dig, ask questions, research, find answers. And I think that's what kind of keeps me going.
Awesome. And you did end up taking a career spanning finance and strategy. So I think the mathematician definitely won, right?
Yeah, I do love numbers quite a lot, but I think it's this misconception people have that if you love numbers, you cannot be creative, and if you are creative, you cannot love numbers. I love both. So either I am an anomaly, or I think there are many people like me, and I'm just trying to find out my tribe. But I equally love numbers and words both, and my entire life has been a reflection of trying to find how they intersect, and stories are one brilliant way to intersect.
Excellent. We will introduce now the second panelist, Manjul Bajaj.
Thank you.
Who,
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for coming. And Manjul Bajaj has worked in the field of environment and rural development. And from there to telling stories, how did that happen?
Well, a lot of stories around the environment and development, and you get to travel the world a lot if you're working in these fields. So a lot of my stories are coming from there, as well as, of course, from my imagination. So.
Great. And you wrote Come Before Evening Falls, which was shortlisted for the Hindu Literary Prize in 2010. Then Another Man's Wife, shortlisted for Hindu Literary Prize in 2013. Those are big accolades. And then In Search of Heer was longlisted for the Mathrubhumi Book of the Year 2020 and the JCB Prize 2020, and shortlisted for the Times of India Author Award at the Galata Bangalore Literature Festival Prize. Is there anything you write that doesn't get shortlisted somewhere for prize or anything?
Let's keep it that way.
Yeah. Amazing. It'll be lovely to have you with us, and I'll definitely get back to you in a bit after I introduce Kanchana Banerjee, our third panelist, who has written the English influence that I have on me, they tend to say who has wrote sometimes in their colloquial. I'm sorry about that, but 2 books, and both with HarperCollins, and they are big publishers. And I mean, you landed up straight away with HarperCollins. Did you publish anything before that?
No, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. It's lovely to be in the company of fellow authors, and Manjul is someone I know, and Debalina, nice to meet you. So to answer your question, Shobit, no, I landed up with HarperCollins. I'm one of the very fortunate ones. I did not. I mean, so my first book got published by HarperCollins in 2016. So I've always dreamt of being an author. I've written all my life, not fiction. I used to write for publications and companies for almost 2 decades, and so writing has been like, second to breathing for me. And I've always wanted to be a published author. I used to dream of being a published author, and that finally happened in 2016. And I was very fortunate to kind of start my journey with a reputed publishing house like HarperCollins. So
indeed, yeah. Let's get down to what the discussion really is about, and how thrillers and historical fiction written by women especially are faring and making headway. So Kanchana, you wrote Nobody's Child in 2019, which is supposed to be a dark, racy thriller, and your third book is also going to be a thriller apparently. And so apart from the obvious, what defines a thriller in your point of view?
So I think, I mean, in a very simplistic term, a thriller is a book that thrills you. It kind of has unexpected twists and turns. It plays games with the minds of the reader. It kind of throws up red herrings and confuses them. It is preferable if the story has an unreliable narrator. That kind of adds more to the confusion and to the mystery and intrigue of the story, and basically keeps the reader at the edge of his or her seat and makes them want to turn the pages. So a story that kind of grips you and doesn't let go of you.
Unreliable narrator, that's a new one, and I think that really sums up how you can really throw people off when they're reading books, right?
Yeah. So to kind of just explain what I mean by an unreliable narrator, the very famous book Gone Girl by Gillian. Yeah. So like a story is told from the point of view of 2 characters, Amy and her husband Nick, and and you're reading the portion by Nick, you kind of believe him. And when you're reading the portion by Amy and she's talking about the same event, so the same event is spoken about by both the characters, and you don't know whom to believe. So, and then you kind of, as a reader, you're torn between the 2. So I think that's a very good example of an unreliable narrator. Or even Girl on a Train by Paula Hawkins, You don't know if you should believe her, if she's the victim, if she's the perpetrator, if she's just a drunk who's rambling. So yeah.
So in your opinion, then this is one of the most important ingredients, is not to let the reader have too much confidence in one person.
See, I would say that this is the most important. I think that in a good book there is no one important ingredient. A good book is like a good dish. It's an amalgamation. It's a coming together of various ingredients, and neither of them overpowering the others. It has to be a happy marriage of many different aspects, and they all have to seamlessly blend together to make a good book. So, you can't say that, having an unreliable narrator is the most important thing, or having, unexpected twists or unexpected turns in the story is the most important thing. It has to be, it has to be a happy marriage. There has to be all of them in the right quantity, because if there is just too much of one, then, it becomes, it's like a dish, with one ingredient, too much of one ingredient, and it doesn't taste good. So, like it has, if there are too many twists and turns, the reader could just end up feeling bored, or could, end up feeling breathless, that, I need time to breathe, and and the plot is just like a roller coaster ride. Or if there are, too many red herrings, and then the reader will feel, oh my God, I mean, what is, So everything has to be in the right
That is
proportion.
exactly what I was coming to next. Is if you throw them off too much,
Yeah.
sometimes it might just frustrate the reader, and you'll be like,
Exactly.
this guy's just tossing me around, or this person.
Yeah.
Give me the story, right?
Yeah. True.
Okay. We'll move to Debalina now. A marketplace for murder questions the idea of murder in the age of fragile digital identities. How do you define fragile digital identities? That was what stood out for me when I was reading the description for this.
So I think it's something each of us are living through, right? We are here now on one particular digital channel. We might have another identity on another digital channel. There is no uniform one face. We may not even know who the person is who's speaking to us on a digital channel. And that for me, classic murder stories and thrillers are often called whodunits. In the digital age, the whodunit becomes even more difficult because you really don't know who done it, right? The person could be hiding under the image of someone else, and fake identities are actually real. So because I love research and I love history, and the entire idea of fake identity is not new. Even before digital age, this has happened, right? People have assumed identities, and even Gone Girl, which Kanchana kind of referred to, was inspired by the real life story of Agatha Christie, who is the best known writer of whodunits. Right. And her own life, she went through an incident where she had assumed a different identity and she had run away from home. So this is not new, but I think it just becomes more urgent and more real in the digital times today. And the impact of somebody assuming an identity becomes extremely stark. So I've taken an example of what happens if that happens. And since I've worked a lot in the world of investments and startups, I've combined that with what happens when that happens in the world of very high growth startups. So where does the impact, many-fold rise in that case? And there is a whodunit. And I've twisted the unreliable narrator slightly. So in my case, it's an unknown narrator. So it's written in both the third person and the first person voice. The first person voice is the voice of the the unknown killer, if you can say so. But it is one of the narrators. So you don't know who that person is till you reach the last chapter. So that is something, which I've kind of used. And of course, thrillers have many formats. Unreliable narrator is one popular format. You have the classic whodunit, whydunit, which Agatha Christie and all the old greats used to write about, where there would be a final denouement and, everybody would be considered potentially guilty till they're proved innocent. You have true crime now, which has picked up a lot. You have the procedural fiction where there's a detective person who is the person going through the entire journey. In my novel, I picked up the idea of a citizen detective. So it's a journalist and a lady who is really the investigator in this case. And the questions she asks and the role she plays in this particular investigation, also in her own life. And her only qualification is she is curious. There's no other qualification she has to do this, but how that helps her find the answers. So that's what I was trying to get to, Shobit. But yeah, I think digital identity and fragile digital identity is something all of us are going through right now.
Yeah, right. Do you think this kind of genre is now picking up, not just this, but historical fiction? And do you think it's picking up really well now in India?
So yeah, I think I do read a lot of books within India as well as abroad. So I think historical fiction and thrillers have always been in vogue, right? There has been a dedicated audience who read this kind of fiction throughout time, right? And that's no different now. It's just that the type of thrillers or the type of subgenres within that, I think, keeps changing. So if you see now, true crime has become much more prevalent now, right? Earlier, for example, even Agatha Christie or Margaret Atwood, they did base their stories on true crime. A lot of Agatha Christie stories are based on real incidents, but they placed it as fiction. Even Margaret Atwood, people don't know her as a crime author, but one of her best stories called Elias Grace was based on a true crime. But then she made it into a fictional narrative. But I think because of change in audience taste, because of OTT coming in, you do see one subgenre of crime picking up probably, which is true crime, whereas other genres are also equally important. Unreliable narrator, like Kanchana mentioned, after this Gone Girl did very well, there was a slew of books which picked up on the unreliable narrator. But again, the original unreliable narrator, I think, was Murder of Roger Ackroyd, again by Agatha Christie. So I think these are not new. They've been there. It's just over time, based on audience changes and audience shifts, some genres pick up more than others. Historical fiction, I think there is so much material there because history is like the most unknown thing, right? You never know what really happened. So there's tremendous scope for fictionalizing and characterization within that, which I think will always pick up. The latest book which Chitra, Divakarani wrote, again, it's a known story of Rani Jindal, but the way she's placed it is so beautiful. So I think definitely there is a big audience for both historical as well as crime fiction.
Right. And coming to you, Manjul, do you think historical fiction now, especially in the very recent past, is becoming a bit of cliche where people are just using either the Mahabharata or one of our epics and planting stories within the epic itself? And this has been happening over and over. Do you think it's becoming cliche now?
Well, I'm not really such an avid reader of historical fiction. So to me, they look like too many books, especially based on the Mahabharata. It's very confusing, and also on the Ramayana and the characters. And there is a lot out there, and there are a lot of women authors also who've entered and reinterpreted, like there's absolutely the brilliant Palace of Illusions by Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni, but there's also a lot of books which are very confusing because you don't know if it's actually, how much is it just the author and how much is it a recreation of history. So I find that there's a lot of variability across different authors and how it's like almost like a comic book kind of format that a lot of people are following. They create one simple character and they put him in this vivid background of history, and then there are other people who are doing a huge amount of research and actually getting you fiction which recreates the era and the time. So there's both of that happening, and yes, the more you have of anything, the more it tends to get cliched, but also a lot of brilliant stuff does come out of it. So as a general practice, the more the merrier, I would say. But you have to, as a reader, find what works for you. And,
as Deblina just said, I mean,
yeah.
No, go ahead.
If
please.
I can add to that, Shobhit, Manjul, so I'm an avid reader of both the genres I write in, history and crime.
Okay.
So, and the subgenre I think which you referred to is around mythology, right? So mythology is not, within mythology, placing characters, right? So that's only one part I feel of, what you can do. You can go back so long back that no one even knew what happened. But historical fiction, if you look at it, even historical non-fiction, if you look at it, right? The key element is research. If you look at William Dalrymple and the way he writes, if you look at Yasmin Khan and the way she writes, the critical,
really.
Yeah, its critical piece is research, right? So, and a lot of us who really want to or who have written in this are also avid researchers, and that comes through in the book. So you might have one or two fictional characters, but a lot of what happens in the book are based on true incidents, which is what makes it so so engaging and also so interesting to read. So a big element of historical fiction and non-fiction both is research, and imagination, of course, plays a part in fictionalizing some of those incidents, but you cannot take away from the importance of research when you're writing historical fiction.
And a lot of people are
all I was
appreciating.
saying is that it's unevenly done across the books that are being published. In some, it is really strong, and in others, it sort of takes a very sort of tinsel, shiny look, which I find difficult to believe in. So, and of course, there's all the projection of one's own thoughts and one's own interpretations of history.
If I could just add to what Manjul said, that I pretty much agree with her that it's so difficult to kind of segregate from the plethora of historical fiction books that are written. Some of the books, when you read them, I don't want to take names because some of them are, whatever. I don't want to take names of the authors. It just kind of, you can tell that a lot of creative liberty, has been taken. Of course, as Deblina said, that to write a book on based on any historical period, enormous amount of research and needs to be done. And I'm sure all the authors who write in this genre do kind of precede their work with a lot of research. But then while they're writing to make it interesting, they take liberties. They take liberties with that, and I don't have a problem with that. But sometimes when you're reading a particular book and you feel that a little too much of creative liberty has been taken, so which is okay. I mean, to each their own. But yeah, I mean, I think there is just an overload of books on. Of course, as you said, as Zabina said, that Mahabharata and Ramayana are not history; they are mythologies, and there's just an overload of books on this. But it, like one also needs to keep in mind that this is the genre. This is the fastest selling genre in the country. Books based on Ramayana and Mahabharata. It is so.
And then on the flip side, if you were to take inferences like say from Greek mythology or Norse mythology or something, you would be writing about Thor and Zeus over and over again. So where else do you go?
Yeah.
Right. But the appetite, do you guys think, has increased of the readers in this country for this kind of for this genre, especially?
Who do you want to answer that?
Whoever wants to. It's so, open mic on this one.
If I can just take that up. So I think there has been a while thrillers and crime stories, as Debolina pointed out, it has always been it has been around for a very, very long time, since the time of your Sherlock Holmes and Agatha Christie and all. It has been around for a very, very long time. But there has been a huge surge in the in thrillers. I mean, I can talk about thrillers. There has been, and a lot of women, women writers have got into the frame. Of course, there have been women writers writing thrillers, crime mysteries, but I feel that the number of women writing thrillers now has increased a lot. And I don't like the phrase which has been coined and stamped on us, that they call it domestic thrillers, because a lot of women are writing about the quagmire of the woman's mind trapped in domesticity, and thrilling things that are happening, and deception and etc. So that has earned these books the label of domestic thrillers. Now it doesn't matter what you call them, but I think this is I really don't know whether it is the OTT platforms which is kind of which has given a thrust to this genre, or this genre came up and the OTT platform also came up and took benefit of this rise. I don't know whether this is like a chicken and egg situation, and I really don't know what came first and what came later. But there is I think a flood of books in that typical genre of a woman dealing with the demons in her mind and struggling to kind of find the truth, and someone is trying to deceive her and stuff like that. So yeah, there is.
So
and similarly, I think for historical fiction as well, a lot of women characters are being projected and their voices are being found, like all of Kavita Kane's books, or many of Chitra Banerjee's books, and then Ira Mukherjee. A lot of people are finding that there is an interest in women characters, because history as it's been given to us is a very male history. In fact, even The Last Queen, what has one heard of Jindan, and how much more has been said of Ranjit Singh over the years? So all of these are characters that women are ferreting out because it is of interest to them. And I think it's finding a lot of readers, because we've been left out of history for major part of literature. And yeah, it is growing, and I think it's going to continue to grow because it's also finding avid readers.
I'll take you up on that, and I'm not trying to pitch complementary forces of nature against each other here. I'll come back to why I'm asking this question, but growing up, we've all heard over and over again in various spheres of life that it's a man's world. Is it really a man's world in this particular industry, would you say?
I would say it's not the most unequal of industries, but yes, it is a man's world even here. And it was maybe when we were growing up, it was just a white man's world. And then it opened up a bit and you heard other voices. You heard people from different parts of the world, and Indian publishing started. That itself opened things up for us. And for women, it is a long haul. When you're I think when you're looking at it from a distance, you don't see it. But if you're in the game, you realize that your male colleagues are going to get all the bigger reviews. They're going to get more reviews. They're going to get more of the literary prizes. If you just look at the statistics, they are biased against women. But I wouldn't say that we need to cry about it, because we're out there, we're fighting it, and we're going to succeed very soon.
Yeah, I strongly agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Strongly agree. And just to add, if you look at, I think I read this very funny quote which said that anonymous, the word anonymous, which you see in a lot of writing and history, was probably a woman who would not have been accepted if she had written with her own name. So I think we're very lucky. We don't, if we don't choose to be anonymous, we don't need to be anonymous, and we can write in our own voices, in our own names. So that is how far we have come. And I completely agree with Manjul. There are still, quite a few issues, but the fact that three of us here are, with you today, and we are writing, and we will continue to write, and many stories are being told and being discovered, I think it will only get easier for more and more women going forward.
So
Yeah,
I have a point to make here. So after Nobody's Child was published, and after a couple of months, and the book did reasonably well. It was quite liked by readers. So in the term of so it was a successful thriller. So some people so I did the literature festival circuits, and some people, at least twice or thrice, they came up to me and said, "We just love the way you write, Kanchana. You write like a man." So I was so stumped, and I didn't know how to react. I said, "What do you mean? I write like a man?" She said, "No, like your like the thriller is not is like written." I said, "This is obnoxious," and you won't believe it, Shobit. These comments were made to me by 2 or 3 women, and one particular gentleman also said the same. So so the point that I'm trying to make is that when a woman writes a gripping thriller, which doesn't fall into the domestic saga of turmoil and stuff like that, and so so she has to compete with other men writing thrillers. And in almost all the panel discussions that I was in very few were there other female authors. I was kind of placed alongside with male authors writing thrillers. So so as a thriller writer, it is a little difficult to kind of make your mark there. And and there are like a lot of very successful thriller writers, male thriller writers. So I won't say that I was nudged aside or I was ignored. I can't say that, because I was not. But you do hear these kind of weird statements, and which kind of make you laugh. And I agree with Manjul that there is a bias, there is a fight, but there is no need to cry about it. And we are making
the point here. Just one more point.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Women read both men and women. Both women readers will read both genders without any bias. But you talk to a lot of men, they tend not to read women authors at all.
Yeah.
So there is that inequality. You've lost half the readership just by your name.
Exactly.
And any woman who has published under a male pseudonym has managed to make a breakthrough. If you look at whether it was George Eliot or J.K. Rowling, there is that bias. Don't underestimate it. It exists, but
exactly, yeah.
It is also exactly how, since I said a little while back that I'll come back to why I'm addressing this, is also because I was going to mention again the same names that George Eliot, Marianne Evans became George Eliot just to write, and the Bronte sisters, for that matter, all 3 of them, they took men's names just to write. And you would think that this is now in the past, because this is so far back and we've come so far from that era. And then you look at J.K. Rowling and you're like, I was really stunned that this was actually on recommendation by her publisher, that she took Catherine's, her mother's K, and put it there just to throw in ambiguity in the name when she was doing the Harry Potter series, because the publisher said that you will lose a lot of young males as an audience.
True.
And then she came up
really
with
surprising.
Robert Galbraith
Exactly.
for her crime fiction.
For thrillers.
For her crime
And
fiction.
yeah,
Yeah.
and thrillers, crime. Thrillers and crime, especially, would you think is, especially out of all the genres that are out there, a very heavy male dominion? Do you think?
See, there are equal number of women. I mean, if you look at the international arena and as well as in India, there are equal number of women writing in the genre. And yes, there are a few women who have stuck on to their names, like Paula Hawkins, Gillian Flynn, and so many others. But there are quite a few very successful international best-selling women writers who write thrillers who have adopted kind of a shorter form of their book, like C.L. Taylor, then and some others, like the names don't come to me, but there are equal number. Of course, I think maybe there are slightly more men writing thrillers, but there are just as many women writing thrillers.
But then,
And,
if they are women and they're writing thrillers, why are publishing houses still pushing them to go ambiguous on their names and not lose male readers? This is still a problem, right?
Of course, it's a problem. Like it's what Manjula Manjul just pointed out, that men, like a woman will pick up a book by Paula Hawkins and by other male authors, but a man, if he has if he wants to read a thriller, chances are that he will stick with a Harlan Coben or with kind of whatever so
But
many of them.
Why is that, do you think?
So I think for that we need to ask the men, no?
No, I am a man. I am asking your opinion on it. Why?
I think Kanchana did answer
I will
that
read-
when she said, Kanchana did
Yeah,
answer
so-
that when she said, people said, why don't, I mean, you write like a man, right? I've heard similar
Yeah.
stuff that why don't you add a romantic angle to your book? So I think maybe, I don't know, maybe there's a feeling that we can't write things which are really dark. And obviously all of
Yeah.
us have, and there are many women who can, and we have, our imagination is no less dark. Our life experiences are probably even more dark. And so we can write
Exactly.
dark stuff, probably even more. But maybe it's not expected that easily of women. And that could be one reason. But yeah, you're right. I mean, you should ask the readers, because whenever we speak and whenever people read our books, we don't see this, right? It's before they read and
Yeah.
before they pick up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that definitely is changing, wouldn't you say?
I would say it is changing slowly. It's going to take some more time, but I would like to hope and believe that it is changing.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
the
because-
biggest example, sorry, go ahead.
No, because she was saying you're a man and we are asking you. I was about to say I will read anything. I mean, so long as I'll read the first few chapters of any book that is given to me, and so long as it grips me, I'll just keep reading. It doesn't matter who's written it. Sometimes I don't even know who the author was, to be honest. If the book is so good, I read it and I passed the book's name to friends of mine, and I never realized who the author was. That has happened to me. And then when I wanted to read something fresh, I just go up, look the name of that book that I really liked, and then I'll find the author and I'll see what he or she has written apart from what I read and I enjoyed. So that is my perspective. I know apparently not everybody thinks that way, because clearly people are coming up to you and saying, oh, you should put a romantic angle to
Sometimes
whatever
it's
you're
not
writing.
even conscious, it's subconscious.
Yeah, because it's
a man may not be thinking, oh, this is a woman author, I won't read her, but he may just be tending towards male authors because that's where he believes he'll get a fair reading of the world. There's
so
a
it's basically
distrust.
it's just conditioning over decades.
Yeah, it's conditioning. It's conditioning,
Right.
and it'll change. The more we're out there with our books, the more it's likely to change.
And I also wanted to ask you if it is more difficult as a woman to present to a publisher a bold new idea than it is for a man. Something that's not been done before, or is it the same? Do you think when you talk to publishers?
I'm just two books old, writing my third, and honestly, knock on wood, I've had a very smooth kind of entry into the publishing world. So I've not faced any trouble, and honestly, I don't. I mean, till now, I haven't really come up with with a very, very difficult or a controversial topic that I would like to write about. As I said, I'm only on my third book. I'm just writing my third book. So I think, Manjul and Debolina would be better to answer this question.
Yeah, I just would like to add, I'm also on my third book, but I think what helped me was I have an extremely good literary agent, Suhail Mathur of the Book Bakers. He understands the world very well. So I got a lot of guidance from him into, how to position my books, because he understood my style, both the historical fiction and the history-based or research-based crime that I write. He really understood that. So I think that helped me position my books well, and I also did not face any challenge in acceptance.
Right.
But I would credit
You,
it to
Manju?
him more.
I think the publishing industry has got a lot of women in it, and I don't think there would be a bias at this stage of ideas. They would be open to ideas from a woman or a man, I think, regardless of the gender. I don't think the bias exists there. It may exist in the size of the advances you get, the kind of publicity you get, the more sort of out in the world things, but at the level of idea, book editing, I don't think we face any discrimination.
No.
So that is another interesting point, is that the size of advances, like you mentioned, is there a difference there?
I don't know. I mean,
I'm just asking for opinion. Is do you think that problem really does exist in today's time? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest.
I would say yes, but I don't know. I don't have numbers to back me up. I don't have, nobody shares the size of their advance with somebody else. But I would suspect that there is a bias towards, men, especially men who are doing well, book for book. If you compare author for author, book for book, it could be there.
What do you think, Debolina?
So I think since I like data and I don't have data on this, I don't think it'll be fair to comment. Yeah, because it'll be conjecture, right? We'll know one or two books and only the big advances get talked about, right? Nobody talks about small advances. So the data itself is biased and skewed. So that doesn't make for a normal distribution. So not fair to talk about it.
Right.
Yeah, true.
And how about when you project an idea, say, for a book, or let's say you pitch a story to your publisher or your agent? Has it happened that you've had to compromise your idea a bit to their how to politely put it, to their guidance, if you will, is to tweak your story or your idea a bit? Has that happened?
So no, it has not happened with a publisher or with my editor. But this is something which I wanted to talk about. But I'm glad that you made it. I mean, you brought it up here, though it's not exactly related to Debolina. You have gone dark.
Yeah,
Debolina?
just like her next book, I believe.
Yeah, she just got. I think she's frozen anyway.
She's frozen.
Yeah. So I think Kajal will message her. Yeah. So the thing is, I like, while it's kind of ironical that I'm saying this, because Nobody's Child, my second book, it has been optioned for a web series, and production is underway, and I feel very happy that the book will be up on the screen.
Congratulations! I didn't know about that.
Okay, yeah. So thank you. But I feel that this OTT platform and the explosion of the OTT platform has had some kind of I would say, an adverse effect on the writing mind. And what I mean by this is that when I was writing my third book, and I have another story idea which has been marinating in my head, and I was talking to my film agent, and he said that, Kanchana, so the thing is, I like to experiment with narratives. If you read Nobody's Child, and Shobit, others, I hope you do read it, you'll see that I've written the book in multiple narratives, in first person, present tense, first person, past tense. I like to experiment with narratives, and I do that, and I'm doing that with my third book. So he and there are certain other aspects of the third book which I don't want to reveal now. He said, Kanchana, it's very difficult to kind of portray this on a screen, because this kind of a multiple narrative and the other aspect which plays an integral part of the story, is going to be very difficult to kind of portray this on screen and write a screenplay. So why don't you change it? Now, of course, I did not change it, because I'm not a screenwriter. I'm not writing for the screen. But I feel that this explosion of OTT platforms in the country, and these various production houses actively going out and signing deals, and somewhere at the back of the mind of the writers and also possibly the publishers, they feel, because most of the books, barring a handful of them, most of the books don't really make money. So I think, at the back of the mind, somewhere the publishers and the writers feel that if I can get a movie deal, that will be good name. It will be good for my brand name, and I will also get some money in the publishing. So it's a win-win situation for everyone. But this I feel, so while I have never really faced this with my publishers, they have never ever told me, my editors, I've discussed my story idea with them, they know what I'm writing, they have never ever told me that you should change this to soup, blah blah blah. But there are others in the in the picture.
Penumbra.
Yeah, so they I just feel that writers are getting influenced by the OTT explosion, and that's not a good thing for a writing mind. It's not a good thing, because if you're constantly writing with the thrill aspect, you are compromising on your language. A book is supposed to be a book, and not written with the idea of a book becoming a movie or a web series. So I just feel that like this is just what I feel. So
It's a very important point you've made.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
How about you two? Ever faced anyone telling you to tweak your pitch a bit?
Not really, but editing is a very interactive process. And as a writer, you have to be humble, you have to be open to it, because it ultimately improves your book. So, that a newcomer has that feeling that my book is already perfect and any suggestions are not welcome. But in reality, it's not like that. You have to be open until a book is out there in the world. It's open. It's open to suggestion. It's open to changes in language. It's open to changes in plot. So I wouldn't say that any of my books have been tweaked out of shape, but the process itself helps you to get a better book out. And that's why I'm such a sort of fan of conventional publishing, because I feel that the many rounds of editing you get are validation. This feeling that my book is a pristine thing the moment it leaves my hands is true. A book is something which a number of eyes looking at it can make a lot of difference, and a number of experienced people going at it. So, one shouldn't feel possessive about it. If you want it out there in the world in its best form, it should be open.
Yeah, I read something about editing, especially. I am sure I'm paraphrasing, and I can't remember who said this, but it was something like writing is actually editing. Otherwise, you're just taking notes, which I believe is true for sure, because I went through the editing process and I saw what I had written turn into something else completely. But I was trying to address more right from the onset. So when you're pitching, does the publishing house ever influence what you're pitching to them?
With fiction, you normally tend to pitch a full manuscript. You don't pitch like in fiction, you pitch ideas. I'm sure there must be a lot of tweaking then. But with fiction, you offer a full manuscript. At least that's what I've done each time. So then it doesn't really change that much. It may become better, but it doesn't become different. It doesn't become a different animal, a different story.
Right. Okay. And so what is the general perception now from editors or publishing houses now, say, compared to, let's say, Manjul, when you started writing for the first time? Has the perception towards authors changed a bit? Is there more, from what I understand, a newer author and a publisher, the dynamic sort of changes over time when the author gets more established? Is that still the case, or has that changed a bit, where they start addressing an author as an author right from the get-go because they are willing to publish their work?
I don't really have an answer to that, because I had a sort of long gap between my books for adults. I've published Another Man's Wife in 2012, and I didn't actually come up with In Search of Heer till 2019. So there was this large gap, and I changed publisher. And so I don't know, but definitely somewhere along the way, readers start seeing you as an author, which doesn't happen immediately and which can be very hurtful because you've come out with something you think is brilliant, and there isn't the readership for it, even though your publisher is pushing you, everything's happening. But as you hang in there and keep writing and keep getting your books out, the reader universe expands, and that's very comforting. I'm not very sure about relationship with publishers, but yeah, I think they treat you better also because that experience is showing through in your writing. Your sixth book is definitely going to be different from your first book.
Yeah.
I mean, it comes from the fact that you've matured as an author.
Sure. So there's another important question, this one especially from me, is that all of you have written books that have had accolades, I mean, prizes and OTT platforms taking over and theaters playing your stories and all that. There must have been at least at some point in time where you had to face a little bit of rejection. How do you do that? Not just probably from people who you pitch it to, but also from readers. I mean, one story cannot please everyone, and obviously you have to play with that in your mind. But there has got to be rejection at times. And how do you handle that? I'll come to Devalina first.
Yeah, so I have a very different take on this. I'm an entrepreneur myself. So as an entrepreneur and as an author, I think I face rejection twice over than what a normal person would. Life is rejection. But on a more serious note, I think for me, the rejection really started with initially me not believing that I could write, because I've always lived a life of numbers. I've not studied, English as a discipline. So I was an avid reader. So just the fact that I revered authors so much, and when I decided that I would write, it was a very tough step for me to think that I could actually write a book. So I think the validation had to come from myself first. I was my own biggest critic, I would say. And once I completed that hurdle, I was able to find some people who believed in me. Like I said, for me, the literary agent played a very, very big role. Suhail Mathur, he was the second level of convincing, and then the publisher, and then the OTT, and all that happened. And I do strongly believe in what I think Malcolm Gladwell had talked about, right? 10,000 hours. That writing is a discipline where nobody has ever seen perfection. So I'm constantly improving my own craft, and like someone mentioned, your sixth book is better than your first book. I totally believe in that. So I think we're only honing the craft further. So as we get better, I think we'll only see more more acceptance, especially from readers, and that's a journey I think which is really exciting. But I think rejection, I just take it as what's the next thing which can be done, because that's the part of life. I don't really see that as something which could stop me. The biggest thing which could have stopped me was me myself.
Right. You, Kanchana?
So, I have an interesting story to tell about this rejection question of yours. So the first version of Nobody's Child was actually rejected by HarperCollins. They found the story very very placid, and it was completely different from what got published. So soon after I had published, soon after I had submitted the book, the manuscript, I think all of us, or at least I have an internal radar which tells me that what I've written is not really working. And I began to feel that way soon after I had submitted the manuscript. And a different version of the story started kind of buzzing in my head. And when they rejected the first version, I was absolutely convinced that I can write a much better tale. And in fact, like soon after I had submitted to HarperCollins, I had submitted the book. I submitted the same manuscript to another big publishing house, and they told me that, Kanchana, we like the story and we like to take it to our editing table. And at that point, the second version of the story was screaming in my head. And I distinctly remember it was a January morning when I told this very senior editor in the second publishing house that no, I don't want you to take the book to the editing table. I want to rewrite. I want to rewrite the whole book. So 90,000 words. I was prepared to rewrite it because I believed in my head that I could do a better version of the story. I can do better than this, and I rewrote the story. I rewrote the story completely, and I resubmitted it to HarperCollins, and they just fell in love with it, and it was one of their lead titles in 2019. So I feel, Shobit, that when you face rejection, it is not a failure. It is a sign from the universe which is telling you that you can do better. When one door shuts on your face, it's a hint that you need to look somewhere else. You need to introspect. You need to think about what you could have done differently. And the reason why I keep talking about this in most sessions is because I want to put this out in the world, especially to youngsters who kind of who get so deflated and defeated by failure, by rejection. And one hears of young students ending up taking their lives and doing terrible things to themselves, that don't a rejection or a failure is not the end of the road. It's not the end of the journey. It's just the universe telling you that you need to take a different path. And I'm so glad that I listened to myself. And in fact, this is a joke between me and my HarperCollins editor Swati. I tell her that you need to reject my manuscript for me to do better. So she says, Kanchana, don't be silly. And I hope that doesn't happen, because it was not easy to rewrite the whole book. But it kind of teaches you something. It teaches you to listen to yourself, and it kind of pushes you, makes you push yourself harder. So that is my take on rejection.
Yeah, I will paraphrase somebody else yet again, and I still don't know who said it, but somebody said once, which was something like, I have never failed. I just found out ways that wouldn't work, which is, I believe, which I have taken to my life as a lesson, and I try and imbibe that in me. And it's just, I mean, what can you do better so that you do better the next time and you succeed if you haven't in the first time? Manjul?
Yeah, I agree with what Kanchana and Deblina have been saying. It's essentially, rejection is a chance to revisit your manuscript. And, you see all these motivational articles about so-and-so was rejected 30 times and so-and-so was rejected 20 times. I mean, it's not the same book that was rejected as the book that's been published. So you have to understand that they made something of the process of rejection, and what you see in the world is very different from what was rejected. No author submits the same manuscript 30 times. You have to be a bit thick to be doing that. No, you've worked on it, you've improved it, you've done something with it, and it's worked. So rejection is part of the process of creating a great piece of literature.
Yeah,
And if
just
it
to
doesn't
add,
that's better.
Yeah, I think for me, this was very starkly pointed out when I remember I did the session Margaret Atwood had done on Masterclass, and she had read from both the versions of her book, exactly how Manjul mentioned, both versions of her book, Handmaid's Tale. The first version she'd written in a third person voice, and the second time she changed to first person voice of the key character, right? And sometimes it's as small as changing the voice of the character. This is something I did myself in my book. And a lot of us kind of go through these things, what moves the story forward. And sometimes it's got to the editing table, sometimes the publisher catches it, sometimes you yourself catch it, and you go through multiple versions to make it better. But yeah, I think that's the journey we probably take when we agree to be writers.
That's right. So just before we wrap up, just to sum all this up, I would like, if it's okay with you, all three of you once to sort of share a message to aspiring authors, especially to authors trying to write in this genre, either thrillers or historical fiction, and also to aspiring women authors. Your messages, starting with Manjul, please.
Okay, I hadn't thought of this, but essentially keep writing. That's the only thing that makes you a writer. The fact that you sit down and write, and don't pander to your self-doubt. Anything that you write can be edited, it can be improved, it can be worked on endlessly. So don't be diffident about what you're doing. If you want to do it, just go out there and do it. And that's it.
You, Kanchana, anything for thriller aspirants?
Yeah. So, of course, keep reading a lot. Read Indian authors and international authors, and of course, write a lot, because you can't edit or improve a blank page. It's only after you have written something that it can be improved, it can be changed. So, and also don't pay too much of attention to the external environment. Which genre is doing well, which genre is not doing well. A lot of, I meet a lot of people, they say, oh, I want to write a love story because love stories do well. I want to write a mythology because they said so. Don't cater to don't cater to trends, because trends keep on changing. I would say write the book that you would want to read, because like you are your first reader. So write the book. I write what I like to read. And if I'm not happy with what I'm reading, I just delete and rewrite, edit, delete and rewrite. So write what you like to read, because you're your first reader, and don't pay attention to what is the popular trend and what's going on. So that's it.
I'll just add to that just for a second, and before we go on to Deblina, but there was, when I started writing short stories and I started putting them up on the internet just to try and develop my writing skills, there was somebody who was interested in publishing an interview with me, and they asked me, what sort of genre do you prefer to write in? And I said, have you ever asked a baker what kind of pastry he wants to bake more often than others? It's as simple as that. And if you actually care for writing, it really doesn't matter what you're writing about, right? You can, if the idea is to tell a story, and the story can be anything. On that note, Deblina, please, if you could add to that.
Yeah, Manjul and Kanchan have already said quite a lot. I think reading is critical. I believe there is no writing without good reading and a lot of reading. But I would say two things which are often not talked about when it comes to writing, especially thrillers and especially, people who are starting off with writing. One is research. Maybe I over-index on research. For me, that is extremely critical. A lot of good ideas can come from research. And the second is the discipline of writing, right? So people think writers and authors are people who get ideas in their sleep, but it's hard work. Writing and rewriting and rewriting and editing is extremely hard work. It's very easy to give up. So the best writers are not be the best people who had a story in their minds. They probably were the most disciplined. So I think discipline is something which is really, really critical, and that kind of differentiates a could-be writer from a would-be writer.
Excellent. Thank you so much, all of you, for your insights. I will quickly sneak around and see if Kajal wants to take any questions from the audience, because I'm sure people are waiting for me to shut up and ask for themselves what they want to ask you. We'll check with that. Kajal, if you could come in, and if there are any questions from the audience.
So there's a question showing up here. Okay.
You're not audible, Kajal. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. My voice was not audible. Aradhna Shukla here has a question. So I will just go ahead and post some questions which are there on the comments, and Shobhit, you can take it further from there.
Sure. So yeah, we can see it on the screen now. How open are publishers in accepting content based on reality, thriller, or other genres? If the content is controversial, how open are they ready to accept it? Or do you have to edit a lot of content, or do they reject it outrightly as they don't want to touch it?
No, I don't think they kind of reject it outrightly. I mean, they are kind of very open to stories based on true crime. Like in Nobody's Child, one of the central characters, in fact, the antagonist, the main villain, who's a woman, she has been inspired by a real life character. All of us know about her. she allegedly killed her own daughter while she was sitting at the back of the rear seat of the car. Her first husband killed her daughter, who was sitting in the front seat, and the body was later on found. So we all know who I'm talking about. So so this was pretty controversial, and they did not have a problem with it at all. In fact, I know some other author friends of mine who have written about other true crime events which are still pending conclusion. And I don't think publishers have shied away. So they kind of I don't think publishers are adverse to accepting or accepting to consider or look at books on controversial subjects, as long as it's,
I think they're attracted to them because they're
Yes,
more
yeah.
topical, they're more current, there's something that's not been done before. So if the quality of writing is up to their standards, I think the topic itself would be more attractive, not less.
yeah.
In fact, true crime probably is one of the fastest growing genre within the overall genre of crime. And I think the only thing publishers, I completely agree, they don't shy away. They probably look for it, but they would want to see the sources and the research which you have, right? It's so how in depth can you go in that, right? I think that would be critical when you're doing true crime versus saying this is a fiction, but it could be based on a possible true crime, which is also case in some crime novels.
Right. I hope that answers that question. And Kajal has a question of her own. When a new reader begins reading, they usually ask for suggestion from other readers, book clubs, and usually people begin their suggestion with books written by foreign writers or popular writers. When will Indian writers get their dues, since we know that how many wonderful books are now being written and are out there?
So this is something which I keep on commenting on book clubs. I kind of see these posts, and every time I see these posts, I suggest books by my friends who have written and published wonderful books, and I keep on commenting this, that why do people only kind of recommend foreign authors and their books? They should, there are enough and more Indian authors coming out with good books. So like as an author, I always go out there and put out the names of my fellow authors, and I do see a lot of these posts. So I try and do my bit here.
Yeah, I would say, it's 6-7 books written by all of us right now itself, which can be recommended, right? So that's itself a start. So I think every such discussion, every such connection we have with fellow authors and with, potential readers, I think we can all do our bit to say that, there are enough really good books in India coming out. There are also probably books which are not in English. Like I'm a Bengali, so there are a lot of very good Bengali books as well. So I think people would probably read both regional language books as well as English books, and which is really great. But what irks me is people think that when it comes to English, it should not be people from India writing, right? I think that is really strange. And one big personally, I have a pet peeve that why bookshelves have a separate section called Indian authors, right? They don't segment the books by genre, right? There's no other books by nationality except Indian authors in English. I think those are probably things which play into people's minds, and the more people read good books written by Indian authors in English and in regional language, the more that will change, hopefully.
True.
Yeah, excellent point, that one, about having an Indian author shelf.
Indian author in English.
Yeah, Indian authors in English, yes. I think that's it. I don't see any more questions popping up. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you. This was really enlightening. And I hope the viewers also enjoyed it a bit. Not a bit, quite a lot. Kajal is back on. Over to you, Kajal, now. You're on mute again.
I mute myself and just forget about it. But okay, so it was such a wonderful session. It was lovely to have you here. I'm sure all the insights that have come through in this discussion would be really beneficial to everybody who's looking forward to get themselves published, because we do want to go ahead and this question, which I actually posted right now regarding Indian authors not being recommended as much as we should be. So this really irks me quite a bit, especially like how Debalina said that some of the people say, oh, but then it doesn't look like this is your native language. Come on, even if it's not my native language, this is the language I chose to write in, and this is the English that I know, right? So, I hope all the writers who are actually looking forward to get themselves published in this year and in the coming years will find some motivation from this discussion that we've had today. And we really do want to see a lot of women out there in the market, a lot of women authors, spreading their wings. And I'm sure women authors will take a lot of inspiration from you all. Thank you so much, Debalina, Kanchana, and Manjul, for making time today. Till we meet in the next session of Pen Connect with Women Authors with the next set of panelists, it is bye from Penmancy. Thank you everyone for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you so
us.
much, and
Thanks
thank
for
you.
joining us.
Thank you for having us. Bye.
Bye.